can do for you. And then I'll share some personal experiences just as a participant. And we'll put together kind of the 4 key things that you can do to help get your participants engaged in your peer-to-peer fundraising event. But before I really dig into those tools and those data points, I wanted to share this statistic, which I think is really interesting. So a recent study uncovered that between 30-ish and 80% of peer-to-peer fundraisers never actually raise any money. So that's regardless of the kind of event, regardless of the platform, the style of event, the timing of it. And then of the people who do raise money, only a very small percentage of your fundraisers will actually account for a significant part of your revenue. So if you can boost that participation and that engagement just a little bit, if you can get those $0 fundraisers just to bring in a little bit of funding, that can have a really profound impact on the revenue you generate for this event and then just overall. So how do we actually get people to engage with us? It sounds easy on paper, but actually making it happen is something else entirely. So I wanted to share these 4 key behaviors with you. The way we've identified these behaviors is our data scientist went through fundraising data from hundreds of different organizations, thousands of different participants. He identified which participants were really effective, who raised a decent amount of money and who had the highest engagement levels. And then we were able to identify some patterns in that donor behavior. So over the next little while, we're going to look at what those behaviors are and how you can inspire your participants to raise money by encouraging these 4 behaviors. So this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at personalizing fundraising pages and how and why we want to convince our participants to do that. We're going to look at how and why to encourage our participants to send fundraising emails. We're going to explore social media usage among your participants. And then we're also going to look at kind of the mindset behind gamifying your fundraising or setting milestones and encouraging participants to reach those milestones. So the first behavior I really want to dig into is personalizing fundraising pages. And this is important largely for 2 psychological reasons. The first one is that if your participants are putting time and effort and energy into customizing their fundraising page, they've proven to you that they are invested in your event. They now have a personal stake in your event success. They also are going to be, it doesn't sound selfish, but they want a return on that investment. If they're pouring their time and effort and energy into supporting you, they're going to want to see you succeed. So that's part of it. The second reason that this is so effective is due to a cool little psychological hack called the Ben Franklin effect. The Ben Franklin effect is very handy for any fundraiser, but what it refers to is this phenomenon where someone likes you more if you do them a favor, or if they do you a favor. So if Kay asks me to do a favor for them and watch a video or send an email to someone, my impression of Kay is much more positive after I've done them a favor than it would be before I did them a favor. So the reason that is because of cognitive dissonance. Our brains say, oh, wow, I just did a favor for Kay. I must really like that person. And it's the same with your participants. If your participants do you the favor of putting together a fundraising page, their brain tells them, oh, wow, I must really like this organization because otherwise I wouldn't have spent all of that time and effort building a fundraising page for them. So it's kind of this cool little psychological double whammy where they're invested in your success because they've invested time and effort into it. And they also they feel more positively about your brand if you can get them to engage with you in this way. So this also does have an effect not only on the psychological aspect of things, but on the fundraising side of things. A big reason that this is important is because of that social proof factor. If a donor has never heard of your organization before, but they see a friend raising money for you, they are more open to donating to you. Knowing that if friend or a family member holds you in a high regard is very compelling. And a research paper that I released with Qgiv back in 2020 kind of quantified the big role that friends and family play in a donor's decision to give. So if you're just to kind of throw those out there, around a quarter of the donors that we talked to around 1,300 donors for this particular study. Around a quarter of those donors said that their friends and family members' opinions of an organization was a major driving factor in their decision to give. And 40% of the donors we talked to will at least run a nonprofit by their family and friends before they give. So knowing that their friends and family support you, think highly enough of you to participate in your event, that will inspire those donors to give when maybe they would have been a little more hesitant about it at first. So we know this works because of a couple of data points our data scientists identified. So we noticed that participants who actually update their page. So when we say updating your page, I mean adding some content to their personal fundraising page, updating their avatar, and really just kind of putting their own personal touch on the fundraising page, raised between 7 and 18% more than the people who don't do that. So, I mean, it's a pretty significant impact on revenue. So we really want to encourage participants to do this. Now, here are a couple of things to keep in mind. We noticed that the participants who filled out their pages are more successful. They raise more money. But we noticed also that between when someone registers for an event and when they actually start building their fundraising page, that time is usually around 5 days. So that's 5 days of fundraising time that they're not really capitalizing on. We also noticed that the average person who does fill out their personal fundraising page finishes working on their page within 24 hours. So if they kind of do an incomplete job, it's good enough, but it's not totally complete, that's where they're going to stop. So you're going to want to keep those little pieces in mind because you can use them to help you encourage your participants to get involved. So we know it's important to start emphasizing personalizing their fundraising page right off the bat. The best time to encourage them to get started is usually immediately after the registration process. So if you wanted to boost participation this way, you could try adding information about updating their pages on your confirmation page after they register. It would also be a good idea to include a note about updating that page in their confirmation email. So if you're sending out an email to anyone immediately after they register, drop in a couple of notes about how to set up a page, why they may want to consider doing so, and then make sure that they know that that's the top priority for you. Now, that 24-hour period where your participants are willing to spend time working on their page is a really small window. So it's important to kind of make it as easy as possible for your participants to fill out that page. Now, customizing a fundraising page is easier if all of the tools a participant will need are in one place. So one of the best things you can do is encourage people to fill out their page and then give them the resources they need to do it well. So there's all kinds of stuff you can give them. You can give them toolkits. Some nonprofits we see have done a great job of putting together whole big long brochures of tooltip or tips. You could do just a one pager, maybe like a little infographic or just even a bullet pointed checklist. You can give them resources like photos and videos that you want them to include. You can give them talking points. So if you can say, a $50 donation pays for a doctor's visit for one of our patients, that's a wonderful talking point your participants can use. Really, the biggest thing you want to do is make it easy for them to put together a compelling fundraising page. And just as an example, this infographic right here is kind of a little example of a simple fundraising toolkit that you could give. And even just these little participant fundraising tips can be a huge help for your participants. So there are lots of ways you can encourage people to build their personal fundraising pages. Try putting together a toolbox of resources and give them some images even that your participants need as they put together their page. And then give them a checklist, if you can, of items to complete. You can also reward your participants for building out their page. This right here is an example of a badge that anyone that is setting up a fundraising page in the Qgiv system can earn when they put together their page. You can do something similar and award it manually if your platform doesn't support that. But really the driving goal here is to get participants to update their pages by making it really easy for them to do so in a very short period of time. The next thing we want to encourage our fundraising supporters to do is to send fundraising emails. Now, out of curiosity, how many of you have ever encountered maybe with your board or with leadership that if you build it, they will come mindset? I know it's really easy to do. I do it sometimes. I'll build a webinar page and then wonder why nobody's signing up for it. We know that building a great event or building a great donation page doesn't by itself help you raise money. It's a good tool to have, but it is a tool. You have to go out there and get the donations. And it's the same for your supporters. You know this, your supporters might not really think about the fact that they need to get out there and spread the word about their fundraising activities. So encouraging your participants to send email appeals to their friends and family will help get them used to asking and get them comfortable with asking their friends and family to support their fundraising activities for your event. This is really important because of what we know about email and its role in fundraising. So in the generational giving report, in the study I mentioned a few slides ago, more than a third of the donors we interviewed told us that email was their preferred channel when it comes to receiving updates and appeals from nonprofits. And if your participants want to raise money, they need to be ready to ask their friends and family for support through that channel. Their friends and family are accustomed to receiving fundraising emails. They're willing to respond to them. And it's a big, important part of fundraising. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm 33. I'm part of the age group that is very active in peer-to-peer fundraising events. And I personally never communicate through email. I communicate through email for work, and I'll like look at the sales ads that I get sometimes, but that's not my preferred communication method. Because I lean on other communication channels. My initial reaction when I'm raising money for an organization is not to ask through email. But we know that that's what the majority of our donors want. So I'm willing to bet that a lot of your participants are like me. We should be sending fundraising emails that we know that that's how people respond and support these peer-to-peer events, but it's not intuitive. It's not the first thing we think of. So encouraging your participants specifically to ask by email is going to be an important step for you, mostly because some of us just probably won't think about it. And we know that sending those emails can have a really profound impact on a fundraising participant's kind of success. Our data showed that people who send fundraising emails raise between 2 and 11% more than people who never send a fundraising email. So we know it's a hugely powerful fundraising tool. So the question then is, how on earth do we get people who are not used to sending emails to send these fundraising emails? And the best way to do that is really to help your participants overcome two primary obstacles. So the first obstacle that you'll have to help them overcome is how busy they are. Your participants are balancing jobs and family obligations and social lives. If they're still working from home, they're dealing with that. Their kids are on summer vacation right now. That's a whole situation. Your event can get lost in the shuffle. And then if you do ask them to sit down and put together a fundraising email, that could be very overwhelming for them. That's where giving them the right tools really comes into play. So giving your participants email templates that they can use will help tremendously. Asking them to kind of share their story is helpful. Maybe give them some prompts they can use as a part of their email. If you give them those templates and those prompts and those tools, writing an email is a lot less intimidating than if you just ask them sight unseen to start sending fundraising emails when they don't really have any idea where to start. And that kind of ties us or brings us to the next obstacle you need to help your participants overcome, and that's fear. So you're a professional fundraiser. You know all of the best practices for asking for donations by email. You know how to tell a story, how to put together a great subject line. Your participants don't necessarily know how to do that. And if you think about how nervous you were, like the first time you really sent your first big fundraising email, you can kind of empathize with the anxiety your participants may be experiencing when you ask them to send a fundraising email. So giving them lots of guidance, lots of hand holding, lots of resources, that can take away a lot of the fear that would otherwise prevent them from sending those emails. So your templates and the resources you give them are a wonderful way to make them effective by taking away that fear and giving them some best practices. If you would like to take it a step further and make them feel even more comfortable sending these emails, I would suggest giving them a contact on your staff that they can contact if they have questions. So if I am raising money for Sarah and I am questioning everything and I don't know if this email is great, it is very reassuring to me to know if I have a problem, if I have a question, I can contact Sarah and ask her if I'm on the right track, and she'll kind of get me where I need to be. So it's another important step that you can take to remove that fear. So you want your participants to send fundraising emails, and we need to help them do it. So you can meet both of those goals by sending them email templates and some other resources like talking points or logos or anything else that you think they might need to send those appeals. And then give them lots of talking points and prompts they can use to put together effective emails. Then, of course, if you can, make sure they know who to contact if they have questions. The next big thing we want to look at is posting to social media accounts. And this is becoming increasingly important for a few reasons. So we went over why it's important to give participants email tools, but it's also important to give them social media tools as well. And one of the biggest reasons that is so important is because we are inundated with emails. I don't know about you guys. I'm curious if you are in the same boat. How many emails do you think you get a day? Drop it in the chat. I know between my work email address and my personal email address, I probably get between 150 to 200 emails every day. I am swamped with emails. And if you send me an email, there is a very, very good chance that I'm going to miss it. Especially if it's not someone that I'm accustomed to hearing from regularly. So the average person receives more than 120 emails a day. I receive more, you probably do too. So the more opportunities your participants have to get in front of their friends and family, the more likely their messaging and their appeals are to be seen and acted upon. So what does that mean kind of from a data perspective? We know now most of the data I've quoted so far comes from the Qgiv system. These have different sources. So in the average campaign, according to Ariba, 15 to 18% of all donations in a peer-to-peer campaign are referred from Facebook. Now, that doesn't mean that they're giving on Facebook. It means that they saw a link from a friend of theirs asking for support, clicked the link, and then made a donation over there. The other thing that was interesting is that participants who post every 5 days or so raise 3 times the amount of money that their friends do if they're not posting. So it's not just posting once a week or once a month or periodically, it's every 5 days, so pretty active. Another thing that I thought was interesting was this note from Network for Good that 21% of all peer-to-peer dollars are raised from some form of social media. So 15 to 18% from Facebook, and the other percentages come from Instagram and Twitter and all of those other platforms that people are using. So I think people are also a little more accustomed to donating on social media. This is kind of anecdotal. It's come from my own observations. I'm sure you all have seen people donating money to their friends on Facebook, whether it's so if I wanted to raise money for the local animal shelter, you're probably accustomed to donating that way. There's a lot less trepidation around donating on social media, but I also think there's a lot less fear from the participant standpoint of asking on social media. I'm much more comfortable asking people to donate to a cause on Facebook than I would be through email, probably because it's a little less personal, it's a little more broad. I'm not always sure who's going to see my social media posts. And as a testament to that, this image right here is actually from a happy hour that my husband and I hosted to raise money for an organization here in town. So, I mean, I'm a professional. I write emails for a living, and I wrote and rewrote and sweated over every fundraising email I sent out. But the happy hour, posting about it on Facebook, inviting people to donate on my timeline, that was fine. That's a lot less scary to me. So this is a great opportunity that your participants are already kind of comfortable doing. So how do you encourage people to start posting on social media? The big thing to remember here is kind of what you were thinking about with email. You're contending with your participants' busy lives and maybe their potential nervousness around fundraising online, even if they're a little more comfortable doing it on social media. So help them out. Just like with emails, you may want to give them templates that they can use for social media posts. If you do that, make sure they know where to find those, how to post them. Give them some guidelines on talking points. Give them some guidelines on choosing a good photo that they can include with their post. You can either give them images that you provided, or you can encourage them to take their own. If you have a video or two that they could share with their networks, that could be huge. I know, I mean, it's an older study, but a Google study found that 52% of people who watch a nonprofit's video will go on to donate to that nonprofit. So try giving your participants access to videos. That could be a huge asset for them to share. And then this is important and often overlooked. If your participants are posting online, and when they're posting online, be encouraging. Send them emails thanking them for their activity, or even better, engage with their posts on social media. If Clay is posting about a fundraiser for his local food pantry, and the food pantry engages with it and gives it the heart reaction or leaves a comment, it makes us feel special. We like knowing that our hard work is being recognized. And that engagement does two things. It makes them more likely to continue to post asking for support, but that engagement on their posts also makes their posts more likely to be seen by other people. So very important to not only encourage people to post on social, but to interact with their social posts when they do so. And then really anything you can do to encourage your participants to post on social and to help them do so well will help you raise more money. So you're giving your non-professional fundraisers tools that will help them do it effectively. And it really just kind of helps them build momentum. When those donations start coming in, they'll be more excited about posting, they'll be more excited about participating, and they are more likely to continue to ask for support. So social media is a huge part of any peer-to-peer fundraiser success, and anything you can do to get your participants excited about posting on social media is going to benefit you and your participants. Give them resources, give them pointers, give them talking points. I'm sure you're noticing a trend when it comes to these tips. It's really just to make sure your participants are well equipped to support you. And then once they start posting, make it a point to engage with those posts on social media so your participants feel appreciated and they are encouraged to continue engaging with you that way. The last big one I want to touch on is also my favorite one, because this gets into kind of that psychology of fundraising. So the biggest thing we want to focus on here is giving your participants milestones that they should work toward during the fundraising period of your event. So We're going to look at setting a fundraising goal. We want to set incremental milestones, and I'll go a little more into what that means for that goal. But the biggest thing here is that we know that humans love meeting goals. And the more goals you give us to meet, the more excited we're going to be about participating with you. That's even more so when we're rewarded for the goals that we meet, and you can use that to your advantage. So how do we know this works? Now, I'm going to talk to you about badges, and I want to throw this caveat out here. So I'm going to use badges as a success gauge, but really this applies to any milestone you set for your nonprofit. In the Qgiv system, you can associate fundraising milestones with badges. You don't have to have a badge to set a fundraising milestone. It's just a terminology thing we're going to use here. But the thing I want to point out is that we've noticed a correlation between the number of badges a participant earns and the amount of money they raise. So the more badges they earn, the more milestones they reach, the more money they raise overall. And it's most dramatic if you look at the jump between no badges raised and 1 badge raised. So if someone has earned no badges, if they haven't had a fundraising milestone set for them, they've not been working toward anything, that person raises around $90. If a person is working toward a milestone and they raise at least 1 badge, that jumps up to just over $300. So there's a ton of speculation around why that could be. It's kind of one of those chicken or an egg situations. Are the most engaged fundraisers that were going to raise money anyway earning badges because they are predisposed to being engaged, or is the badge really like the big motivating thing? We don't know for sure. What we do know for sure is that having milestones associated with fundraising and rewarding people for meeting those milestones is effective. So how do you do it? Here are the steps. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is set a goal. And I'm going to encourage you to set 2 goals, at least maybe 3. So the first one is you want to set your overall event fundraising goal. The one you may want to do is individual goals. And the one that it might fit for your organization, it might not. If you are encouraging team fundraising, which can be really fun, try setting a fundraising goal for your teams. And the secret here is this next bullet point. It's choosing goals that are both significant, but are also achievable. So you want people to feel like they have to work to reach that goal, but it needs to feel like it is within reach. After you do that, you'll break your goals into smaller milestones. And then the word I want to put out here is smaller milestones. So we want them to be incremental. I'll use myself as an example for why we want to do this. So a few years ago, I participated in a local fundraising event. The overall fundraising event for the whole thing was we wanted to raise $60,000. That is very overwhelming to me. Then I was told, and I'm not responsible for raising $60,000. They wanted me to raise $2,000, which feels way more manageable. But that was still a little intimidating. I hadn't really done it before. But they gave me even smaller goals. So getting to my first $100 in donations felt pretty easy. And then my next step was to get up to $500 in donations, and that was easier. So kind of stepping myself up to raising $2,000 was a lot less intimidating than just being expected to raise $2,000 off the bat. So if you see your participants kind of being overwhelmed with the fundraising goal that you have overall, try setting those smaller incremental goals. We know that it will help people stay engaged with you longer. They don't get discouraged. They don't kind of shut down when they see that big goal. And having those multiple milestones to celebrate builds momentum and gets people excited. And I did want to call out that last bit. When we recognize people for reaching those fundraising milestones, it's good for everyone involved. We know that humans love meeting goals. We also know that humans love being recognized for meeting goals, and coupling that goal with some kind of reward is very compelling. You can do all kinds of different rewards. You can do digital rewards. You can do shout outs, you can do raffle tickets, you can do swag. There's all kinds of ways to reward people for meeting fundraising goals. So here's how to do it. If you want to take your fundraising to the next level, you set those milestones and then you decide what the incentives are going to be. So I kind of alluded to some of those things. You could do badges or social media shout outs. You could do something tangible. I know an organization here in town, you can earn a t-shirt if you raise a certain amount of money, and people do all kinds of kooky stuff to win a free t-shirt. You can do medals if you're doing a race. You can do trophies. You can do all kinds of stuff. One of the most compelling incentives I've seen, one of our organizations, the Purple Plunge, has an exclusive party that you are invited to only if you're in the top 50 fundraisers. And people go all out trying to get into that party. So if you pick something that you know is compelling to your audiences, it can have a huge impact. And then I also wanted to throw out there this idea of team fundraising. I kind of alluded to it a couple of slides ago. Now, the caveat, team fundraising isn't necessarily the best fit for every organization, every donor base, or every event. You don't need to feel like you have to have a team-based fundraising event. But if you decide to explore it, do try to encourage some friendly competition. Friendly being the operative word there. If you don't want to have any like fights or anything. But for a lot of fundraisers, people are competitive. They like to see their name on a leaderboard. They like to get recognition. They like to win. So if that's something that you think would be a good fit, I would encourage you to explore it. I'll share this story with you instead of anything else. So I participated in that peer-to-peer fundraising event. I'm not a competitive person. I don't care if my name is on the leaderboard. I'm more motivated by checking things off and meeting the milestones and hitting the goals. That's compelling for me. But a lot of the people at the same event are very competitive and they love the leaderboards and the badges and the incentives. And actually there was a couple of fundraisers, they work for the same company and they were in a meeting and they got in trouble during the meeting because they each had their iPads like under the table of the meeting and they were refreshing their leaderboards because the two of them were battling it out for top fundraiser. So people get very competitive. You want to keep it friendly, but if you have the right event and the right group of people, try throwing that competitive element in there. People love it. So regardless of whether or not you do team fundraising, regardless of what incentives you use, I would encourage you to give your participants incremental goals and milestones that they can work toward reaching. It makes working toward a big fundraising goal feel much more manageable. And it's a really good tactic if you are looking for ways to keep people engaged in the fundraising process for the duration of your event. And as your participants work toward these goals and milestones, they're going to feel great when they reach a particular milestone. You can really take that to the next level by showcasing your top fundraisers on leaderboards, giving them incentives that are tied to each milestone, and just celebrating their victories with them. So anything you can do to keep your participants moving toward new fundraising milestones, taking that next step in the fundraising process, will pay off. They'll have more fun and you'll raise more money. So I want to go back over these four key behaviors of successful fundraising participants. It was a lot of information and a lot of data. So here's a quick recap. So the first thing you'll want to do is help participants build out their personal fundraising pages. And you can do that by giving them tools and resources they can use to do it. So put special emphasis on updating these pages within the first 5 days of your participants' registration. The sooner they get started, the better. And then remember that participants will spend very little time, only about 24 hours, working on this page. So anything you can do to make the process easy and efficient will benefit you because their page will be more complete. The second thing you can focus on is making it easy for people to send fundraising emails. Remember, these aren't professional fundraisers. They're just they're enthusiastic, but they need some guidance. So include some email tips and some best practices in a document or even an infographic that you can give to them. Better yet, if you can give them templates and resources that they can use to kind of take the time and the thinking out of it. It's easier to spend a few minutes tweaking an existing email than it is to write one from scratch. And remember that your participants are enthusiastic, but they may be kind of nervous about sending these emails. So be empathetic, guide them through the process, give them a point person to contact if they need help, and just keep encouraging them. The more you can remove that fear for them, the more effective they're going to be. And then as you're working on keeping them focused on emails, also encourage them to get active on social media. I have a hunch that a lot of your participants are more comfortable asking on social media than they are through email. But anything you can do to encourage them to post on social media is going to help. So give them those tools and resources, probably a lot of the same resources you may give them for their fundraising pages and emails. And then remember, as they engage with you and as they share on social media, make it a point to engage with those posts. It makes them feel good about what they're doing, and it makes especially Facebook's algorithms more likely to show that post to other people in their network, which generally transfers or translates to more money. And then the last big engagement piece we looked at is setting fundraising milestones and then consistently rewarding progress toward those different milestones. So setting big goals and then creating little incremental steps towards those goals is a great tactic for keeping people engaged. It makes fundraising less intimidating, and we like working toward a goal. Do, if you can, incentivize those milestones. For some of those milestones, a badge may be all you need. You can shout people out on social media, you know what your donor base finds compelling. But you could also explore tying those milestones to real life prizes and incentives, like parties or swag or raffle tickets. And then if you want to, and you want to encourage that kind of friendly competition, you may want to explore showcasing your top participants in a leaderboard. Now I'll say that the incentives that you want to give your donor base may be very different than the incentives from an organization that has a different set of participants or a different mission or a different event style. So get creative. Don't feel like you have to do anything because the nonprofit down the street is doing it, but do try to find some way to incentivize these milestones. The key here is just to keep people engaged, keep them excited about working toward goals, and keeping them invested in fundraising for your organization. So, I mean, that was a lot of information. So I hope you have some great ideas about ways you can kind of engage your participants and encourage them and keep them involved in fundraising. I'll have time for questions, but I did want to throw out there, we are somehow going to get you a copy of this, this study that we did. This is retaining your P2Peeps, and that is the same topic. I'm doing a session with the Qgiv again in a couple of months, but so we talked today about engaging and inspiring and keeping your participants fundraising for you. This ebook will then tell you how to keep those participants so when they come back the next year, they're already ready to go and raise money for you. So that all said, do we have any questions?
Well, there are definitely a few questions out there.
Awesome.
One quick one was, does Qgiv have any like template examples on your website for people for some of the assets they might want to have for peer-to-peer fundraising?
Yeah, I'll have to look. I know we have some. I know we have some. I wish I knew what those were right off the top of my head, and I don't. But I saw that was from Lisa.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Lisa, I will write down your name and I'll send you something. Lisa Stella. So could you tell me what organization you're with?
We'll get you the whole list, Abby, and
Okay.
you just blast it out to everybody.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'll send that over.
Okay, so a couple other questions. And on Qgiv's platform, can you award badges manually, like for some sort of random award to
Yeah,
people?
you absolutely can.
Okay.
So we've seen some cool ways to do that. You can award them manually. It's a great engagement tool if you are trying to get like, especially if you're trying to get like board members or junior board members to raise, you can give them a little like board member badge. That actually, I'm going to scroll back through some of these. Oh, this one, this event here has badges that they awarded manually. So they
Okay.
have badges for staff or boards. And then if you have someone that does something cool offline that maybe it's hard to track in the system, you can award it manually for them as well.
So what about doing something like, since it's really important, obviously, according to your data, to get people engaged in the platform and building out their fundraising page. Have you seen anyone do like contests for like the funniest fundraising page or the best story or anything like that?
I
Okay.
haven't seen it, but I would love it.
Okay.
If anyone does that, tell me immediately and I will go take all the screenshots of your whole event and share it with everyone because that's such a good idea.
Awesome.
It's also a really great way to encourage some of these behaviors that are a little harder to track. So if you really want to emphasize social media engagement, you could manually award a badge to someone that you see going above and beyond on social media. It's a really good idea.
Okay. Cool. I think do we have some more on there, Sarah?
Yes. Is there a specific social network that you suggest focusing on?
So the answer is sort of. It really depends on your donor base. Now, my gut reaction is to say you are probably going to want to emphasize Facebook, and that's for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that nearly everyone has a Facebook. Whether or not they're active on it is kind of a different story. But the other thing is that the demographics that are most active on Facebook are really the baby boomer and Generation X generations. And they are the generations that are, one, most likely to give in larger increments. But also Generation X in particular is very willing to raise money for you in a peer-to-peer event. So if you're engaging your donors that are most likely to participate and most likely to donate, Facebook is probably going to be a good move for you. You might want to look into Instagram, but I mean, the thing is less which channels you should be on and more which channel you can do successfully. So if you are one person and you're trying to figure out if you need to be on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever else, you may have the easiest time just picking one, and Facebook is probably going to be the easiest for you and the tool where you get the most visibility. You can do the others, that's cool, but
I'll just tell you from our experience, you're going to get the most reach on Facebook and Instagram.
yeah,
It's very hard to engage users on Twitter unless you're on Twitter a lot and you have a robust following. So
that's so tough.
and then the niche ones, like we'll call them niche, even though TikTok is becoming huge. That's a very specific demographic right now. It's very young. So data is not in yet on TikTok, but Facebook and Instagram, you get a lot of mileage from those two platforms. So
yeah, definitely.
One more question. Is it easy to overdo it, or is there not much, like, is there not no such thing as too much?
You mean in terms of
In terms of encouragement, yeah, interaction.
I mean, there is such a thing as too much, but I think our threshold for too much is probably not everyone else's threshold for too much. So, I mean, you don't want to email someone every day or multiple times a day. That's a little much. But I mean, I think it's well within reason to email people maybe once a week. And I'll say this. So your cadence with encouragement and communication is probably going to look different throughout the lifetime of your event. So if you are running a board campaign where your board members are fundraising for you, that will look a little different communication wise. And if you are running an event where you have several hundred people running a 5K. I would also say that at the beginning of the fundraising period, so after they get set up, you want to send them a couple emails encouraging them to put their page together and start posting. But if you have a fundraising event that the fundraising period is 3 months long, you're probably not going to email them every week. You may start increasing your communications closer to the day of the event. But I would feel out with your fundraisers what they're into. The awesome part about having a group of peer-to-peer participants is that they have already proven that they're invested in your cause. And if you just ask them, hey, how frequently do you want to hear from us? You can kind of suss things out from there, or even just pick 1 or 2 participants that are really knocking it out of the park and get their impressions on how frequently it's helpful for you to communicate with them and what they're looking for.
All right. That's all I got over here.
Okay, and any other questions for Abby? I know we're just about out of time.
Awesome.
Okay, I think we're good there. So I'll tell you from our experience, peer-to-peer fundraising can be really, really effective, but you really do have to do your homework. And it's all in the planning. So having a good, following some of this guidance, having a good plan, providing assets to your fundraisers will go a long way to making your campaign successful. And having a great platform like Qgiv's platform makes it a lot easier to do all of that. So good luck, everyone, and be sure to check back in to some of our follow-up webinars, especially the one coming up from Abby, where she goes over some of the results from their latest study on peer fundraising. It should be really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be great.
So thanks, Abby. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Abby.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.